Well, hey everyone, it's Andy Prisco at Jumpstart Mastery. In June of 2024, Jumpstart Mastery brought together Gary Noesner, founder of the FBI's Crisis Negotiation Unit and lead negotiator at Waco, and Jack Cambria, longest standing commander of NYPD's hostage negotiation team, to engage in a long form educational series of discussions regarding crisis negotiation. And I had the privilege of facilitating that discussion. These conversations invariably lead to curiosity that leaders and managers might have about implementing meaningful crisis negotiation and crisis de-escalation programming in their agency or system. Please do not hesitate, if you have that feeling, to contact us at Jumpstart Mastery by emailing info@jumpstartmastery.com. We would be more than happy to see how we can explore bringing the icons to your leadership team, management team, senior executives to assist you in the ongoing culture change and transformation that our systems so desperately need in supporting people who present discontrol, dysregulation, and crisis. Thank you. One of the great insights that has come out of being together for me and having my fingers pretty plugged into a variety of educational systems that serve public safety, behavioral health, corrections in crisis intervention, crisis de-escalation, crisis negotiation. I have some awareness of what's not in curriculum, and being around the two of you brings that into stark relief very, very quickly, how much more we could be doing in the education domain. One of the big takeaways that I've derived from our time together in front of the camera and off the camera is this notion, Gary, you've pointed this out a couple of times. There is a prevailing belief within the public, within, let's say, administrative leadership, that de-escalation skills, active listening skills, is all that's really needed in the, let's say, reaction to or response to a crisis incident. And we don't think about, unless you're working professionally in this capacity, the public does not think about all of the other things that go along with that to highlight the value of those skills. In other words, it's very unusual for like a lone wolf negotiator to just be on call and show up in their own private vehicle. Like I think of the movie, I won't name the movie, but there's been so many movies where it's been, one person facing the odds. And it does a disservice to the practice and the discipline of crisis negotiation. I mean, both of you represent agencies and programs that were filled with many people, had many procedures. You were never just deployed by yourself. Deploy the negotiator and then in your own private vehicle you were whisked to the scene. It just didn't happen that way. What are your thoughts on, if you wanted to share a message with our viewers and with other people who might come into contact with this material later, what would you want them to really know about teamwork and what makes the negotiation discipline work meaningfully?
Yeah, it's totally a team sport, and that's the one thing Hollywood and television don't reflect because you don't want 20 actors. I mean, I was involved, as you know, in the 2018 Paramount Waco series, and they had actor Michael Shannon playing me, and there was one other negotiator. Well, at Waco, we probably had 10, 12 negotiators per shift
Right.
engaged in a myriad of functions that are forwarding the goals of the team.
Right.
Now, Hollywood says, well, we don't want to pay 12 actors and write dialogue for 12 people, so they don't do that. What's more frightening, though, is when some decision makers, even in law enforcement, don't understand that. They'll say, deploy the SWAT team and send a negotiator.
Yeah. Yeah.
As though you're an individual.
Mm.
And it just doesn't work that way. And Jack and I both know that there's a huge variation in the complexity of incidents and the size and configuration of agencies throughout the country. So a typical police department might send just a fairly small number of officers out to deal with someone barricaded or misbehaving or a domestic squabble. So you may just have a negotiator and hopefully one backup or what we call a coach in the FBI. But that can go up to a multi-hour scenario, working through multiple shifts with a lot of people. And ideally, we want to use the experience, the knowledge, and the assessment of a group of people to our advantage as we are jousting with confronting this person who's got a lot of stress, having the worst day of their life. We want a team to be able to say, "What did you hear, Jack? What did you hear, Andy? Oh, I didn't pick up on that. That's a good idea. We need to focus on that in our next conversation."
Yeah.
That's how you leverage a team. And more importantly, when we look at the negotiator, the primary negotiator, it's important to keep in mind they are simply the voice of the team.
Yeah.
They're not devising the strategy on their own. They are implementing what has been agreed upon by the team. And there's a side benefit of that is that we rise or fall together. If the
Right.
negotiation is successful, as it is in the mid to high 90%, then we did this collectively. We don't give credit to Andy because he was the one on the phone. The
Right.
negotiation team was successful in convincing this person to come out.
Right.
And consequently, if we, sadly face a tragic situation that doesn't end so well and there's loss of life,
That's
well,
shared.
that's shared. We
Right.
we all made this decision together. Sadly, it didn't come out the way we had hoped. But that's the way to handle this. That's the best way to handle negotiator stress. Don't put the world on one person's shoulders.
Yeah. And Jack, I would imagine that phenomenologically you encountered the same thing in the New York City context,
Sure.
because he's describing, his work with the federal agency, obviously, and they had regions. But this happens across agencies and across domains.
Well, it's no doubt we make better decisions as a team, as a group, as opposed to an individual, because the team can then, talk about, well, let's talk about that. Maybe that
Right.
might not be the best approach. So, no doubt we make better decisions as a team. So, ideally, and the negotiators would know that, ideally, there are 5 positions on the team. There's the team leader, there's the primary negotiator, there's the coach, there's the scribe, and then there's the intel officer. Now, different negotiators have their own ideas of which role is most critical.
Valuable, important.
They all are.
Yeah.
Usually it's the negotiator, the primary negotiator, if successful, gets the lion's share of the credit, gets the pats on the back. Great job,
They're the lead singer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they're in the forefront, you
Right,
got it.
right.
But my dear friend Mark Lother, who you know from
Yeah.
Utah, he teaches that probably the most critical part of that team, or one of them at least, is the coach, because they keep the negotiator on focus. And I certainly go along with that. But I also would suggest that the intel officer is also a very valuable member of that team, because it's the intel officer that's gathering the intelligence, doing the
That
research,
people are gonna
checking
use.
police records and knocking on neighbors' doors. You know this guy, and gathering intelligence where the team can now develop their strategy. So you start out with the basics because you have very little information, unlike corporate negotiations, business negotiations,
Right.
where the entity has the luxury of being able to research the issues well in
Right.
advance, weeks in advance. They'll probably research who the other negotiators are for the other company, the success rates in the past, what the issues are. You can research the
Less
issues.
urgency. There's more
Yes.
preparation. There's
Yes.
the game that you're
You
preparing.
know your adversary better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you can even plan a lunch to start building rapport well in advance, right?
Right.
So in police hostage negotiations, you have none of that. So you're
Yeah.
really, truly negotiating from the cuff. And you have to, start your process. You start it with the basics, active listening skills, which we spoke about a little bit already, and probably we'll speak about more. And then as the intel officer, he's gathering or she's gathering intelligence about why are we here today, interviewing family members, friends, acquaintances, anybody that knows anything about it. Does this individual have a history of domestic violence, checking police records? So we have a good sense of who this individual is.
Gary, when you wrote the guidelines, which really, I would say, if I had to guess, you tell me if I'm wrong. If I had to guess, the need in your mind to create guidelines was to some extent standardize practice and prevent freelancing or the introduction of ill-informed ideas into the art, science, and discipline of negotiation. You probably derived a need to develop these guidelines by also identifying with counterparts from other parts of the country. They're experiencing the same phenomena too, like send the SWAT team and a negotiator. Think for a moment about what that says
Yeah.
to the public or
Mm.
to the negotiator themselves. I'm in there with one strategy or one agenda, and may not be shared, or it's unequally distributed. You know, the
Yeah.
whole
Well, when we formed, the FBI helped form the National Council of Negotiation Associations, representing 15 or 20 associations around the country, representing literally thousands of hostage crisis
Sure.
negotiators. One of the big reasons we put the guidelines together was the feedback we were getting at the FBI, where the negotiator says, I know this stuff. My team knows this stuff. My boss does not know this stuff.
right,
And if I go say to my boss, we need to do this, he said, what are you, 3 ranks below me? Why am I listening to you?
right.
But now he said, boss, here are the guidelines. These are the national standards
This
that
isn't
are,
me, not my
it's not
opinion.
me. This is what's embraced by the profession around the country, time tested and based on, real experiences and
So important.
operational issues. And, we need to be cognizant that we are going to be measured against these standards. Anything we do, if this ends badly, well, did you follow the standard? Did you do this? Did you do that? Why not, officer? And I think like any other profession that has standards, it really helped. Like I say, there's still a lot of police chiefs and sheriffs, send the SWAT team. They understand that's a team. Send a negotiator. They don't understand that that's also a team. And we work together. And Jack's right. The intel coming in, what we know the first hour of a situation compared to what we know in hour, say 4,
Oh,
it's the universe of difference. Because now we've talked to family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, criminal history, mental health history, all kinds of issues come into play that guide the negotiation strategy that we're developing because we have more information to base it on. And of course, with the passage of time, we are gathering information from the most important place directly from the person we're talking with.
yeah,
So all of this comes together and our thinking and our strategy is fluid. It may change, it may alter based on what we're picking up. I was talking off camera before where we talked about the famous 1982 incident where a fellow named Norman Mayer drives a truck up to the Washington Monument and he says he's going to explode it.
right.
And an FBI negotiator in Miami interviewed his brother, and the brother said it was really strange. He was down here recently, and he gave away his old baseball glove and an old jacket that was special to him, and whatever these items were. I don't remember them accurately, but they were items that were important to him, and all of a sudden he gave them away as though they had no meaning.
Yeah,
Well, for trained practitioners,
yeah,
we know this is suicide
right.
on the way. This
Yeah,
person is setting his affairs in order, things that are important to him. He wants somebody to have them,
yeah,
but he don't plan on going on. So
right.
the negotiation team dealing with that person needs to know that information, and that comes through the intel process.
Yeah. Um, was it your experience? Because what you've described is for me, it creates images of a team that's working effectively and optimally, let's say within the full spectrum of intervention, less restrictive all the way to more restrictive. Was it ever your experience that the negotiator was deployed in the service of, we have to do it this way because of visibility or policy, but we don't have a lot of resources to dedicate to that approach, so you're going to do this, and if you fail, that's why the SWAT team is there, and you will essentially buffer them from having to manage the discomfort of these kinds of skills or this kind of approach.
Yeah.
Um,
I
in other words, where the negotiator and the force use mechanism, the SWAT team, the tactical team, the people behind the rifle, let's say, are just really not supportive of this approach at
mm,
all. They're doing this out of a mandatory sense of responsibility, but we're going to under resource it because the likelihood is that we're going to resolve it this way.
I think it's critical to deploy all your resources in any type of major incident, whether
Yeah.
it be hostage negotiations. A quick example is my background is I spent 16 years with our tactical team emergency service, which was also a rescue unit. So we would deal
Right.
with the suicidal jumpers and so on.
Yeah.
And we would deploy our air bag, it's the air jumping bag,
Yeah.
so people would jump into it if they were jumping, to the Empire State Building. We had several jumpers on the observation deck of the Empire State Building, 86 stories above the ground.
Would it even work, by the way?
That's where I'm going.
Yeah.
No, the point of it, we would deploy all the resources we had available to us. So if it did go badly, people would critique us. Why didn't you bring the airbag? You know.
Right. So now you're doing that in the service of the public's observation rather than the utility of the
Yes.
intervention itself.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you have to understand the mindset of the tactical team, and commanders, right or wrongly, are much more familiar with tactics
Yep.
because that's what law enforcement does. We deploy resources, we contain
Yeah.
situations, we put down riots and
We
arrest
control
people, we
things.
do
Yeah.
raids and whatever that stuff. That's our bread and butter. What we do as negotiators is kind of murky gray and not
Yeah.
clearly defined.
Not an exact
But we
science.
should understand the tactical guys aren't deadly killers that just want to kill people. One of my best friends, probably my very best friend, was a pilot, in the military, and he had a long, distinguished career, but he never flew in a combat situation, and it was always a regret of his.
Yeah.
Not that he wanted to bomb somebody or kill somebody, but this is what I've trained to do.
Yes. Yes.
And I want to be tested at that thing that I've been trained
Yes.
to do. So it should be no surprise that these tactical guys who expend a great deal of time practicing,
Preparing. Yes.
preparing, shooting, running drills, it should be no surprise that they want to get the opportunity to do that. But it's still up to us as negotiators to prevent them from having to expose themselves to danger.
Yes.
And sometimes we have to be pretty up forward with the commander to say, why are we doing this now? If we're contemplating these actions, what's changed from earlier? If we're asked in a court of law or a court of a public opinion, why did you go in at hour 6, instead of, hour 2 or 3? Well, what changed? Did he become more dangerous, less stable? Did he fire shots? Did he hurt somebody?
Right.
And if we say, well, we were cold and it was wet and we were tired and we'd been there a long time, that doesn't cut it in the legal context. We have to have a clear, articulable argument for these behaviors and actions from the perpetrator. They left us with no choice but to act. The public will understand that and they will support that.
Yeah.
But if we just did it because we can, that doesn't cut it. Certainly not these days where police are under a great deal of scrutiny for how we respond to events.
It's a dangerous precedent, if I may.
Yeah, please.
If negotiators are called to a scene and then not utilized by the tactical team,
Yeah.
they feel they know better. And we've had more than several encounters in New York City, just New York City alone,
Yeah.
where the negotiators respond and they were not considered as part of the tactical equation. And after a period of time, an entry might have been made and the job went terribly wrong with that subject might have been killed by the police. And the question always comes back, well, wait a minute. You had negotiators on the scene and they weren't utilized.
Yeah.
And it causes a great problem for the tactical commander. And why didn't you use them? It's part of our policy and procedures, in fact, and which is at the direction of our police commissioner. So I think it's very important that the agency head, whether it be a chief, a sheriff, in my case, police commissioner, really has to support the negotiation effort and therefore have a policy. So I teach throughout the country, the entire country. And I always do these informal surveys. And probably 2/3 of the agencies out there, because I always do a survey when I talk about policies and procedures, I asked the question. I said, who here does not have a policy regarding hostage negotiation response? And probably 2/3 of the class raised their hand. And I'm always wanting to, I provide, my policy as a template for them if they want to develop one. But it's got to be at the authority of the chief or the sheriff. So once that's in place, now it's documented, it's memorialized that the chief or the sheriff is supporting the negotiators' response. So if the SWAT team supervisor, team leader decides not, well, the problem is you're going to have to talk to the boss about that, sir. And you do it respectfully. You sell it.
Let's address the myth because you're seeing it too. It's that thing that we touched on in the green room. There is a belief out there that if I don't have the guideline and I don't have the policy, I'm safe.
Yeah, you hear that quite a bit. Nobody can question me because I don't have any guidelines, or we didn't record the negotiation, so nobody can second guess us. And in reality, we had the same issue with body cams on police officers. I mean, I'm not going to say that those things haven't created problems sometimes, but by and large, they tend to exonerate the police. They tend to demonstrate that the action I took was necessary for the following reasons. You can plainly see it yourself. This person attacked me or threatened me or whatever it might be. But there's a larger question here, and that is it's based on our Constitution. There is not a police department agency in this country, a law enforcement agency, that will not say our philosophy is to use the least amount of force necessary.
Yeah.
We all say it, but do we practice it?
Oh, that's everywhere.
And the way to demonstrate is what Jack is just talking about. We have policy, we have procedure. I have a trained negotiation team. They maintain and update their training. They go to conferences and seminars, and they've gotten training from the FBI, they've got it from other people.
And we invite their risk benefit analysis at every
Right.
opportunity.
And I'm depending very heavily on these trained people within my department to open up a dialogue and to do everything reasonable to convince this person not to hurt themselves, not to hurt anybody else, and to come out so that we don't have to make an entry that maybe places us in danger or forces us to take action that harms someone else. That is a philosophy that I don't think anybody in law enforcement will argue with.
No.
But do we always practice it?
Right.
We have a tendency, I know this anecdotally from 45 years in this business, there are times where we make dangerous entries because we are cold, tired, hungry,
Absolutely.
and irritated.
Yep. We put people in seclusion and restraint for that reason. We, let's say, interrupt the work of a social worker or a clinician to resolve an incident quickly for the same reason
Yeah.
you have it in that area. Here's an interesting question. There have to have been incidents that, from your perspective, was the best example of leadership involvement, collaboration between force use and the negotiators. There had to have been those. When it worked right, what did it feel like? And how could you describe the value of it working right to others?
Well, the ultimate payoff when that does happen, and it does happen more often than one might
Yeah.
think,
Right.
teams do come together. They understand that it's critical to have that cooperative, position or attitude about it. And when it does all come together and a life is saved, there's no better feeling in the world, and you live off that for, a day or so, and then you're on to the next job always. But so, yeah, absolutely. And to the guidelines and the policies we were just speaking about, the NCNA, National Recommendation and Negotiation Guidelines, which Gary was the architect of.
The N was really for the Noesner guidelines.
There you go. I think they are so important that in every one of my classes, I provide that it's like a 9-page, document,
Of course.
and I include it in my manual because I want the negotiators to know it. Because as Gary alluded to, it can be a potentially problematic document for the negotiator if they do not adhere to those nationally recommended guidelines.
Right.
Because the first thing, if a job goes terribly wrong, the very first thing that the defense attorney on the other side is going to have in their hand
Mm-hmm.
are those guidelines. They're going to confront the negotiator with it. Negotiator, are you aware of this particular guideline?
Mm-hmm.
And they were taught it in class, so they're going to have to say, well, yeah, okay, thank you very much. Why didn't you?
Yeah.
Do it.
And if you decide strategically to depart from a guideline, just be able to articulate why.
Yes.
Exactly.
What facts and circumstances led you to say, in this particular instance, with this set of circumstances, we're going to do something different?
Right.
Be
And
prepared
these
to
are the
defend
reasons.
it.
Right.
We don't do it because, well, let's try that and see what happens. I mean, I don't ever want to hear that. But going back to your larger question, I know Jack's been there and I've been there. Law enforcement is no different from any corporation, any profession. There's good bosses and there's bad bosses.
Thank you. You're going right to where I wanted to go. Leadership.
I've had the pleasure of work, or displeasure in one case, and pleasure in the other. When you have a boss that really says, "I've got this resource that works for me,"
Yes.
that's trained and experienced and has an incredible track record, I'm going to be receptive to this, and
I
I'm here.
trust his assessment.
I don't
or her
expect that
assessment.
boss to do everything I say, because negotiators negotiate, commanders command.
Right. That's right.
But I expect them to listen and to be open and to be receptive and to be accessible, and that's why we always say when we train negotiation leaders, if you don't go to the boss, you're going to be the Maytag repairman sitting all by yourself in the negotiation truck. Nobody's going to come get you. You got to go see the boss. Here's what we're thinking, boss. Here's what we're trying to do. This is the reason we're taking this approach. Do I have your authority?
That
or
is
your
a
permission?
monster takeaway from our time together, gentlemen. The idea that the practitioner themselves or the leader of the practitioners goes to the incident commander or the boss to make their case, not to wait. That it is a responsibility, a duty, in fact, to go to the leadership and say, we need to lay out why we think what we think and what we think needs to happen next.
And it's not a competition. If I'm a competent on-scene commander and I've got a tough situation, I say, Jack, what are the negotiators seeing here? Tell me, what's your assessment?
Right.
What are your recommendations? Okay. Andy, you're my tactical leader. How does this look to you?
Yeah.
Now, Jack may say, this thing is everything's staying the same. There's been no increase in violent language
Right.
or action. Our communications are lasting longer. They're more meaningful. We think we're on the right track. All right. And when we hear that, no matter what action the tactical team says, I think we can get in there pretty quick and get him. The boss is going to say, I'm not going to depart from this because there's no need to.
Right.
Now, Jack may come to me as a commander and say, this is getting bad.
Yep.
We're pretty
Interactions are getting shorter.
Our sense, this guy from his statements, he's going to kill a hostage.
Yeah.
Andy, what can you do? I think we can get in there. Now I'm going to say, okay, based on their assessment,
right,
and your certain ability that you can, engage in a way that's likely to lead us to success, then I'm going to go with this. And by the way, there are no acceptable casualties in law enforcement.
right.
That's right.
This is not like a military operation. We're going to go attack this town. We're going to lose 6% of our
Right.
people. There's none of that in law enforcement.
Right, right.
So when that action has to be considered, you really got to consider the consequences to your officers.
It's funny. Here's what I'm hearing. Someone who you know of and I'm very friendly with, Dr. Kevin Huckshorn, wrote what's known as the 6 core strategies to reduce seclusion, restraint, and violence in healthcare. And here's the first 2. Number 1, leadership toward organizational change or improvement. Number 2, the use of data to inform practice. And what I just heard in the last 5 minutes are, you got to have a good leader behind all of this.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
That's a fundamental. And you got to have all the data. In fact, you would probably know this better than me. What is the phenomena called when we bring people together on a debrief and everyone shares their perspective and not everybody has the whole story, but only people have relevant pieces? There's a name for that. It's some kind of scientific principle or experiment. It's a phenomena that we do that to get the complete picture because nobody has the complete picture.
After Waco, we had tremendous conflict within the FBI, and there was a lot of anger between tactics and negotiators. And when we finally sat down together, why did you guys do that? Were you sending steaks in for them to eat? No. Where did you hear that? Where did that
man.
rumor come from? There was one famous incident where
You mean like they did that because they heard?
They heard.
Like Gary's team is sending steaks in there. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. We sent some milk in, but there was one instance at night where the head of the tactical team called me up and said, there is a 50 caliber rifle sticking out the window, aiming at our people. I want you to get hold of the Davidians and tell them if they don't pull that back, there's going to be a problem. I didn't wait to check with the commander. This is a reasonable request. We get on right in the phone. The Davidians say, what? Let me find it. Oh, yeah, okay. And they remove it.
Right.
From that day forward, the rest of the hostage rescue team was livid at the negotiators. We've been wanting to know where they've had that rifle since we've been here. We finally found it, and you told them to move it. And their boss never told them it was based on his command. Years later, I was able to
clarify that. You called us. You told us to make the thing go away.
But I'm saying, and going back to your point, when you sit down and have a thorough review,
you learn
these
those
kinds
things.
of lingering pieces of misinformation you have a chance to clarify that
Yeah.
and to put that to bed so that people don't perpetuate these falsehoods.
Yep.
And in a big complex operation like that, there's going to be a lot of misinformation.
I would imagine there were probably um, numerous points of the engagement, the totality of the engagement that could benefit from an individual debriefing in and of itself.
The best way to avoid these misunderstandings, which are still prevalent, they're not unheard of, um, is for the three people in charge of a situation, the command triad. There's the on-scene decision maker, the commander, the chief, the
GIC,
sheriff,
yeah.
whatever. There's the head of the tactical team, whatever you call them, and there's the head of the negotiation team, whatever you call that person. Those should not be meeting in groups of two. Those three should almost be together all the time.
Absolutely.
And saying, well, here's what we're doing, here's what we do. And all the actions should complement one another. I used to have a colleague who used to say every interaction with the crisis site it affects the negotiations. If a news media helicopter's over there, if the person sees something on TV, whatever it might be, the more we can control, coordinate, and move forward the same strategy, the more likely we are to be successful. I always tell a story. One day at Waco during those 51 days, I go to the water fountain and two helicopter pilots walk by and they said, man, we really buzzed them. We really shook the cages. And I was taken back for a second. I said, excuse me, guys. I didn't know either one of them. I just could tell they had helicopter jumpsuits on. Are you talking about the compound? They go, yeah, man, we got about 50 feet above them. We rattled their cage. I said, did anybody ask you to do that? No, we thought it would be a good idea, though. I said, don't think. Don't
Yeah.
do that. Don't do that. But that can happen where people think what they're doing from their point of view is contributing to the outcome that we all want, not realizing, not appreciating that what they're doing may negatively impact on what somebody else is
Yeah,
doing.
we call it freelancing in the incident command system for
Yeah.
NIMS. That it's. I bet you they didn't even coordinate with anybody. They
No,
probably
I think they did that unilaterally, but
Yeah.
it just speaks more and more to the, and of course, smaller the operation, the less likely these channels of miscommunication occur. But you get a tough
Hundreds of
challenge.
people. Yeah.
You get hundreds of people, and you're in some major urban downtown area, and you got somebody holding up a jewelry store or whatever. These resources have to be in lockstep.
Yes.
Jack had to deal with this,
Yeah.
20
Countless-
times a month or
yeah,
40
yeah.
times a month.
And to the point, there's essentially two models of negotiation in the United States. There's an East Coast model and there's a West Coast model. The East Coast model, which I operated under in New York City, where the hostage negotiation team and the tactical team, emergency service, are under two different bureaus. I was under the detective bureau. The tactical team was on the special operations bureau, and we would answer then to a incident commander who was from patrol, because that's where it's happening in a patrol precinct, wherever it is in the city. That's an ideal, well, from my perspective, an ideal model, because now it's that triad that Gary
That's
just
the model
spoke
the
about.
FBI adopted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the West Coast model, where the hostage negotiation team is a subunit of the tactical team. So it's the tactical team commander, usually a lieutenant, who's the boss. And the
So that's a
negotiation.
tool of a preeminent force use
They would call
paradigm.
Special Weapons and Tactics is the acronym for SWAT.
Right.
They view negotiation as a tactic.
Yeah. So the problem that, or again, in personal surveys that I would do, speaking to all these negotiators for over 10 years, I'm teaching across the country, that sometimes it's a problem because the negotiation team supervisor is a sergeant and the tactical team commander is a lieutenant.
So there's a hierarchy issue immediately.
Yeah. So it's usually the incident commander is going to confer with just the tactical commander. I'll give you a quick example. I did a class, I won't identify the city or the state for that matter, about 2 years ago. And while I was teaching this 5-day advanced class, it was just this particular sheriff's office, I can say that much. It was just their negotiators. And on Wednesday morning, everybody's cell phone starts going off, so I know exactly what that is.
Right.
All right, but they're getting a call out. So the
Yeah.
team leader, who's the sergeant, comes over to me and goes, Jack, we have a call out, we got to go. I said, well, that's your priority. I said, listen, I'm 10 minutes away in a hotel. If you get back early, the job's resolved, come, give me a call. I'll come back, we'll finish the day. They pack up their gear. The sergeant then comes back to me a second time and goes, Jack, do you want to take a ride with us? I said, really? Yeah. They even gave me a vest, it was back in
Yeah.
my element, right? So I go, I take a ride with them, and when I get into the knock, it was about a 20-minute ride. We get to the knock, it was a big bread truck. I'm listening, they have the speaker on, and I'm just observing. That's all I'm doing. And when I got there, the individual, the subject, was wanted for drug and weapons charges. And he's barricaded by himself in his mother's house. It was an impoverished area. All right, public assistance. This family was on
Right.
public assistance. And when I first got there, the subject's emotional levels were over the top. And within about 30 minutes, the negotiator got him down to about the halfway mark now. He brought him
Yeah.
down significantly, his emotional levels. Shortly thereafter, and now it's going on about 2 hours, this incident, the SWAT commander, who was a lieutenant, so this is the West Coast model. So they were a subunit of the tactical team, the hostage team was. Tactical commander comes in and he tells the sergeant, of the who is the leader of the hostage team, I'm giving him 1 minute to come out. And if he doesn't come out in 1 minute, we're lobbing gas to that house, through the window. So now the sergeant becomes stressed. Hey, guy, you got to come out in 1 minute or they're going to be throwing gas into your house. Now the subject, who's like down here, to a midway point, now he becomes stressed and his emotional levels go to the top again, right? He says, 1 minute? I can't come out in 1 minute. I have no clothes on. I have my door barricaded. Okay. I'll come out. Give me 3 minutes. The lieutenant, being defiant, I said 1 minute. And so sure enough, he was not able to come out in 1 minute. The lieutenant directs his guys to lob gas, shoot gas through the window into the bedroom of the mother's home. He was by himself. And sure enough, then he comes out. And sure enough, he was also in his underwear. So he was telling the truth. So by my assessment, 3 minutes was not unreasonable to wait. And then if he didn't come out in 3 minutes, okay, then maybe we have to change our strategy. Okay. But the point is that the sergeant's input was taken out of that equation of that triad type of situation. And a further point, I come to learn later on, the lieutenant's rationale for doing that was because his guy, his sniper, was on a hot tar, sun-baked roof for over 2 hours. So you really can't say that to me because I did that work. Don't forget.
Right.
When I was a sergeant in the emergency service, I was a sniper team supervisor. The response to that is, Lieutenant, why are you keeping your guy on the roof for 2 hours? You switch him out every 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, and also never brought into the equation at all was this mother's house. It was his mother's house, not his house at all. She's on public assistance. Now she has to, on her own, pay for a decontamination.
Unit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the residue of the tear gas was all over the walls, the curtains, the beds. May have to throw the bed out. She can't afford this.
Would you say that was a projection of authority, him wanting to assert?
That's a great example Jack just shared with us about why that should have been debated in front of a commander, the 2 points of view. Because what happens in that model that he described, where the negotiators are subordinate to the tactical team, it follows Maslow's theory. If you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Yeah, law of the instrument.
So
right.
I don't want, as an on-scene commander, my tactical commander filtering information I need to hear. I want to hear tactics from you, and I want to hear negotiations from him. I don't want you to tell me what you think the relevance of his advice and assessment is. And that's the problem with that model. Now, I will also say some of the departments around the country that have the closest coordination are ones who have that model, but where there's very forward-thinking individuals involved in the process.
And probably in leadership.
But it depends on personality.
Right.
And I don't want to depend on that person. I even say, we said it in the guidelines, if in your department, the negotiators are a subunit of the tactical team, that's fine administratively. But at the scene, that sergeant needs to have the same access,
Equal
input to the on-scene commander as the lieutenant that runs the tactical team should.
Yeah.
And that's a really important point.
So we're setting aside, let's say, the ordinary day-to-day hierarchy for, let's say, a different unity and chain of command on scene.
Yeah.
We are very rank conscious in law enforcement work, disciplined to the point where the lieutenant says something and I got this. Most, and it's a wrong approach, I believe, but most will just be subordinate to that.
Yeah.
Whereas Gary and I, as negotiation team leaders, we'd go to the boss because we've done this before, and maybe that give that boss the benefit of our experience, and then ultimately you are the boss. But I'd be remiss if I did not give
But
you
you
my
could also
thoughts.
put your head on the pillow saying,
Yes,
I at least made my
you
case.
got it.
And
Yeah,
I
I think
can't,
that's important. You know, even at the famous Waco incident in 93, the head of the tactical team was the military equivalent of a colonel.
right,
The on-scene commander is a general.
right,
I'm the head negotiator. I'm a lieutenant colonel.
right.
And they say, well, that's a small thing.
Well,
It can be and it
yeah,
can't
yes or
be.
no, right.
Yeah. And in fact, after Waco, this was recognized by FBI management and they made me a colonel,
Yes,
equivalency. So now there was, at least on paper, parity. Now he still had a $20 million budget and I had a couple ball caps that I could buy every year,
right,
but but other than that,
right,
there was that embracing of the fact that there should be equal access.
yes,
I want to make a point I want to make earlier about leadership. Again, sorry to keep talking about Waco, just so many examples out of
Oh
that.
my gosh,
The
yeah.
director of the FBI at the time, William Sessions, was very disengaged and very uninformed about our capabilities and so forth and so on, our capabilities as negotiators. Fast forward 3 years to the 85-day Montana situation. Early in that situation, I'm in the command vehicle with, the big on-scene commanders for the FBI, and Director Louis Free calls up and he says, "Gary, are you there?" I sit up straight and say,
yeah.
"Yeah, yes, sir, I'm here."
He was a tough dude too.
He was a former agent. I'm a big fan of his, but he says, "Gary, I want to make this very clear. I want to make sure you understand this. I'm in no rush for this to end.
Perfect.
I want this to end
Perfect.
the right way."
What a message.
And from that way forward, all the on-scene commanders say, I guess the negotiators are driving the train. Now,
Right,
I'm not being parochial about my discipline, but go back to what I said earlier. What is the embraced philosophy?
right,
We will use no more force than what is necessary.
right.
Therefore, the negotiation effort should always be preeminent,
Yeah.
should always be our first point,
There
our
are
first effort.
hierarchies that don't support that, though. I mean, I can tell you definitively in the healthcare domain, particularly in the psychiatric care and services domain, psychiatrists and nurses, unless they are personally prone and supportive of this approach, are not steeped in the principles of it in their education and practice. And there are, for the very solid number of medical doctors, psychiatrists, and nurses that are supportive of, let's say, the non restraint or least to most approach, there are also physicians and nurses who are, we've tried to de escalate this patient for 30 minutes now. It's one more minute. But look at the progress I've made. He's no longer tearing his room up.
Yeah.
He's no longer saying he's going to kick everyone's ass. We're only giving him a minute before we're
Yeah.
going to force
Yeah.
medication.
We,
It's
we,
the
we
same.
have a rule: we never put a deadline on ourselves,
Yeah.
and time is almost always on our side. Jack talked about the NOC, the Negotiation Operations Center.
Right.
Whether that's an old converted ambulance, a motorhome, a trailer, or an office that you've taken over across the street from the incident, wherever you set it up, there's a team operating. There's situation boards, demands, deadlines. What's the perpetrator's name so we don't forget? What was your name again? We've been talking for 3 hours.
Right.
What's his family members? What are things we want to address? What are things we want to avoid that set him off? All of this is laid out by intelligence people on the negotiation team
Priority
and so forth.
information
And
categorized.
most importantly, what I always used to say in our situation boards, why are we here? What's our goal?
Yep.
And in
huge.
big bold letters.
Yep.
We're here to get everybody out we can alive.
You're not letting it be obscured.
Time
Gary.
is on our side.
Yes.
And I think it's important to remind people because we get caught up in other distractions, but people always in law enforcement, I think one of the big problems we have is because we have highly trained people. We've got incredible tactical team officers dedicated to doing some really amazing things. But because of that, they're very confident. They assume they will be successful.
Yes.
Reality is otherwise.
Yep.
And it's my job, whether they want to admit it or not, to keep them safe, to keep them from having to go in. If they have to go in, it's for a compelling reason
Yep.
that we can articulate, court of law, court of public opinion. We had no option. We
Yeah.
had to go. He had 3 little kids in there. He was starting to shoot his gun. He was unraveling. He took some illegal
Right.
drugs he had. We were very fearful for these reasons that he was going to harm those kids, and we decided to take action. The fact that it ended tragically is killing us all. But, we
And you
made
are
the effort.
probably so close to consensus when that decision is made because everyone has been immersed in why are we here? What's the objective? Time is on our side. That's in their face
And we
all the
should
time.
point out, usually the first people at a scene, love to hear Jack's thoughts. Usually the first people at a scene that know it's going south and going bad is the negotiation team.
Right.
We know it before. The tactical guys are outside there with a relatively limited amount of information. We're the ones that are listening to this guy, talking to
real
this guy,
time.
seeing it unravel,
Yeah.
making an assessment of the threat. So it is not uncommon. I've done it. I know Jack's done it, where I have recommended tactical action because of these indicators.
See, look at that, Gary. I think it's so huge that you would just so naturally disclose that here. Look, there are times
Yeah.
where it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
There are times when use of force is the best course of action.
Negotiations. Yeah, negotiations, as I mentioned before, never fails. Never fails.
Right.
What fails occasionally is the perpetrator or the subjects or the person in crisis. They fail to make the right decision.
Right.
But it's not because we didn't
They
make
made
the
the
right
choice.
They made the choice.
That's
They're the
exactly-
true incident commander. I think I might have mentioned it in the previous episode. They are the true incident commander.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are determining how this job will play out
That's
through
right.
their actions.
There are theorists in all of the force use disciplines. Tony Blauer says it all the time. The bad guy controls the level of force.
There
The
you
bad
go.
guy
Thank you.
controls the fight.
There you go.
To what
Precisely.
extent the force is going to parallel the danger. So
Yeah.
if you produce danger, we're going to have to produce a concomitant amount of force to manage it. And there are, let's say, ideologues who are completely opposed to that idea. And those who proffer those kinds of ideas, in my experience, have never spent any time at the incident site.
Yeah.
And this isn't the early days with Frank and Harvey in New York in 73 or the early FBI people.
Right.
We have mountains of data and
Yeah.
information
the
now.
jury's back now.
We have everything we need to know that if we take this thoughtful, patient approach, we never claim we're going to get 100% of the results we want. But we're well into the 90s.
Yep.
That this is the way to proceed. We know this through experience,
Yep.
and so to depart from that, you better have a good reason. You better have a good reason to do that because we serve the public in law enforcement. We serve the public. So we owe the public to give them the very best service that we're able to do. They're paying our salaries, they're paying for our training. They expect us to expend all the effort necessary to resolve this with the least amount of force. And that's what we have to keep in mind.
Parting thoughts, Jack and Gary.
As part of because we just touched on situation boards, when I teach, I recommend the inclusion of a threat assessment chart on the whiteboard, on the presentation easel pad, and it's nothing more than 2 lines in the shape of an L. So the vertical line would represent the line of emotion, starting at 10 at the top, going
Anxiety
down to
or
0.
arousal, right.
And the horizontal line would represent the timeline, 1
Oh,
to 2 hours, 2 to
beautiful.
3 hours.
Yeah.
And as time is going on, they should make little marks because
Right.
over time, a long
We
period
should
of
see a
time,
downward trend.
they could see how they're doing. And I, as an incident commander coming into a knock, I can now look at that after 3 hours and see that the lines are going down.
Yeah.
The dots are going down. And if I see that, I'm going to think negotiations are effective. If those lines continue on an upward trend, then I might be thinking tactics over time because the emotional levels are not coming down. So it's a good measure of
And
how you
add
might
a little
be doing.
granularity in it. Only the uninitiated would expect to see a straight graph. What you're going to see is peaks
That's right.
and valleys,
That's
peaks
right.
and valleys.
But the trend
It's
should
starting
be
to go down.
yes.
We
The
hope.
peaks are lower, the valleys
Yes,
are lower.
that's the point.
And we're progressing in the right way. I
Yes.
mean, we're dealing with volatile people having the worst day of their life, very impulsive individuals quite often, reacting to a whole series of events. Should it surprise us that their emotions are going to spike up and down? No. But we continue with our program. We continue with our approach. We continue to relay to them, we're not here to make your day worse. We want to help you out of this. We're decent people. We're going to treat you with respect. And that has a powerful influence on people where we can get them to do what we want.
Oh, thank you for joining us for this very rich, necessary, and under shared discussion about teamwork in this very complex discipline of considering levels of force and least to most as a continuum. Thank you both so much for your contributions on this
Thank you,
topic.
Andy.